As of the moment I'm recording this, there's a few more loose ends to be tied, when it comes to free agency, but I feel comfortable making this Suns video now because they basically have almost like a brand new roster, so they're not going to be able to make a play for like Damian Lillard or James Harden. I feel like this team is set, so I can go ahead and kind of review what their offseason was looking like. But to understand what this offseason was, we have to go back to the trade deadline when they got KD. When they got KD, they really had to gut, their rotation players. And it was kind of clear that they did have a very strong regular season when KD was healthy. Quickly, in the Clippers series, it was kind of clear that this team was flawed. This was not an 8-man deep team. And that kind of got exposed in the Nuggets series. It didn't really matter how good KD or Devin Booker were playing. Really, the rest of the Suns were not really producing on offense. And it just became apparent that after this KD trade, they were just too shallow. Things certainly weren't looking grim, though, as I think that, when they made that KD trade, they already had big plans for this offseason to kind of retool this team. It wasn't like they were in a dire situation or anything, because they did take the Nuggets, who were the eventual champions, to 6 games, which was the most out of any team in the playoffs. And this was despite, DeAndre Ayton had mentally checked out in that series, and Chris Paul got injured, and even in the 2 games that he was playing in, he did not play well at all. So going into this offseason, I wouldn't say they needed to panic, but it was very evident they needed to make a few moves as they just became too shallow. And starting with Chris Paul, it was a weird situation that it got reported that they were going just to cut Chris Paul and then re-sign him to save $15 million, but then that ended up being false. But they still had that on the table. So it was a weird situation. It kind of seemed like they weren't going to get anything for Chris Paul, his market was that bad. But they did find a suitor in Washington. They traded for Bradley Beal, which is very interesting to say the least. On paper, Bradley Beal is a way better player than Chris Paul at the moment. Bradley Beal is still about all-star level, but he's also getting paid $50 million a year or whatever the Supermax is. And he still retains his no-trade clause that he had in Washington. If this, fails, Bradley Beal is stuck with you, and he's stuck with you for long term as well. So they're really putting almost all their eggs into Bradley Beal, which I think is probably a mistake. Now, don't get me wrong, this is on paper just a pure upgrade for your roster, I suppose. But in terms of kind of fit, this does not make any sense at all. Because really, Bradley Beal is going to be suffering from third star syndrome that we've seen with almost every super team, or at least big 3, in the history of the NBA. When Chris Bosh went to the Heat, obviously his stats went way down. We saw that with Kevin Love and the Cavs. We saw that when James Harden went to the Nets, his scoring numbers went down at least. The key word here is scoring numbers, which is basically what Bradley Beal offers. I've seen some people kind of rumble that Bradley Beal has the potential to be a good defender or something. You haven't really seen it, and I understand, people talk about, well, Washington was just a lost cause the last few years, but I don't see him being anywhere close, at this point in his career. He is what he is. I can definitely see him putting some effort on defense and improving some, but only so much, right? He's not going to be some type of go-to defender for this Suns team. But when it comes to fit, Bradley Beal is basically just a copy of KD and Devin Booker, who were also kind of copies of each other. There are subtle differences in all of their games, but really they're just all, 3-level scorers that prefer to score in isolation a lot. Historically, with third stars and big 3s, the best big 3s have had a third star that can do things other than scoring or other than just having the ball in their hands a lot. So with Chris Bosh in Miami, he could still play defense, he could still rebound. With James Harden on the Nets, he kind of transformed how he played more and he became more of a facilitator. The best big 3s in history, they usually have the first 2 stars are the ones that are going to be producing the most on offense, and then that third star is going to be doing other things that help you win championships. But with Bradley Beal, he's just a scorer. He's a playmaker as well, but he's not going to be your starting point guard this season, I don't think. And so I kind of lean towards him having a down season for sure. I think that's kind of obvious. But there are some counterpoints to this, because I think we're kind of in uncharted waters here. Because kind of what we saw with the Suns in this playoffs was basically the defenses could not guard both Devin Booker and KD at the same time. In the past with the Suns, I think that defensive have put a lot of their defensive emphasis on not letting Devin Booker score or just getting the ball out of Devin Booker's hands and then making the rest of the Suns beat you when it comes scoring wise. So, for example, right, if the Nuggets and the Suns were to have a rematch in the playoffs, they're probably going to have to put Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope on Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, and KD. And I just feel like, on paper, strictly one-on-one for 3 different matchups, the Suns are heavily winning those matchups. And I think part of the reason that 2022 Nets failed and got swept by the Celtics was really because KD and Kyrie were allowed to do whatever they want. They just kept isoing and expecting a different result, 4 games into the series, and then they just got swept. In this case, we have Frank Vogel here, who's a proven championship coach. He did great in Indiana, he did great in the Lakers, and then he just got scapegoated. So I don't expect for him to kind of stand for that, and I think that he's going to be able to get these guys to buy into whatever offensive system he wants, and we're not going to have like a Nets 2.0 situation. So as you can tell, I'm a little bit confused on how this Bradley Beal trade is going to pan out and like how lethal their offense is going to be. But I'm just going to leave it at that for now. I'm leaning towards it not working out that well in the playoffs, but we're going to see. I really do feel like we're kind of in uncharted territory here. We're going to see what happens. But moving on, we have DeAndre Ayton, who I feel like we should bring up because he was in a lot of trade rumors. There was a lot of buzz on what they should do with Ayton. I thought they should have kept him because it felt like probably after this, playoffs, his value was too low to get a good enough return. And he just had one down year. And I think that a lot of this had to do with Monty Williams. I don't think we've got like an exact story, but there's some videos that kind of suggest that DeAndre Ayton and Monty Williams just like hated each other, and even like Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton may have not had that good of a relationship either. So both of those people are gone now after, a down year. I certainly believe he has the ability to bounce back, and even like, let's say he's still kind of dejected this year because maybe he's not getting enough offensive touches. He'd still probably be very solid in the regular season, but if he's as dejected as he was last year, he's going to play himself onto the bench probably, which would be a major problem. But overall, I think that his problems, whatever Aiden's problems were, are probably gone now, and I think that he's going to thrive again, but we'll see. Now, on to their other kind of smaller signings. This was kind of what they were banking on, that if they got like this big 3 that, other people just come and like kind of ring chase. And they really got 3 steals because they got Eric Gordon, Damian Lee, and Diop. And these are all just like 3-and-D players that really just kind of felt kind of like their wings and their guard positions. I mean, all of these guys, they're kind of like just classic 3-and-D players. They're very solid. I don't have that many doubts about them. I do kind of have somewhat of a concern that they're not big facilitators. Like, sure, they can all play and make all right, but kind of one of the concerns I have with this team is like who's the point guard, because right now it seems like it's going to be like Cameron Payne. But on to their last few signings, they did sign Drew Eubanks as their backup center. I thought that was like a very good get because they're only getting him for like $2.5 million, which I think is a steal. He's got great energy. He's got great motor. I do kind of worry about his size a little bit. Like, if they do rematch against the Nuggets, I do not want him guarding Jokic whatsoever. But overall, I think that's going to be a great signing for them. They signed Yuta Watanabe, which is, they kind of needed more like 3-and-D players, whereas more so Yuta is more just like a sharpshooter. So I don't feel like he specifically fits this team, but really every team can use a sharpshooter for sure. Like we saw Duncan Robinson, his explosion, I think in game 2 of the finals kind of won Miami that game. And there's plenty of other examples where just like you bring some type of sharpshooter off the bench and he kind of turns the momentum around. So he's going to be helpful. I don't think he's going to be in like their standard playoff rotation, but I can definitely see him coming in at certain points when they need to kickstart their offense or something. But I'll go ahead and wrap up my thoughts by giving the Suns a B grade for their offseason. They did a lot. They did what they set out to do. After this KD trade, I expected them to get very active this offseason. And because they're taking a lot of risk, I don't feel like I can give them an A grade because this offseason, in retrospect, could certainly turn out to be like a C or a D. Or it could very well end up being an A. We'll see what happens. But there's certainly a lot going on here. With Bradley Beal, I'm not in love with that trade for sure. but it certainly has intrigued me. And then kind of like with the other guys, like I feel like they should have kept Aiden, which they did. And, those 3-and-D players I kind of mentioned were good pickups, but I am kind of worried that this team is lacking in just like facilitators. And Drew Eubanks was a good pickup, and Yuta Watanabe was a good pickup, even though he's not specifically what this team needed. And also, Frank Vogel was the coach that they needed to get, probably. So, overall, I'm feeling a B. But anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more videos in the future. Comment something if you have something to say. And thank y'all for watching. I guess I'll see y'all next time.